Well, it's Wednesday, so the doctor is in the house, or in the garden, to be precise, to answer your questions. Dr. Bharat Pankhania is an independent expert in public health, and he's been helping us through this crisis with his crystal clear advice. Good evening to you, sir. Are you well?
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you.
Good. Lots of questions, because I think there's quite a bit of confusion since the announcement yesterday. So let's crack on. Martin says he got a text to say he can stop shielding, but he has chronic COPD. I think that's a lung condition. Should he be shielding, he asks, or not?
Well, Martin has got what we call chronic obstructive airways disease, and what it tells us is that Martin is vulnerable. So whilst he has a vulnerable lung, we don't want an additional issue like a respiratory COVID disease as well. So please, Martin, even if you stop shielding, please be careful, take all precautions not to get infected. Best way to do that is avoid being around too many human beings.
Kay asks whether bubbling is still valid. This is the idea that a single household can bubble with another household.
Yes, provided, you see, we introduce weaknesses whenever we make changes and alterations. So if one household remains intact and it's not mingling with any others and you're sure about it, and then you have another household which is also doing the same but remaining intact, then the two may combine and move freely amongst themselves, because it is two independent, clear, infection-free units coming together. That should be perfectly plausible.
OK, lots of questions on that, really, about who you can and can't see socially, especially, I have to say, grandchildren. Now, Richard says, our first grandchild was born 3 weeks ago. Congratulations, Richard. When will we be able to give him a hug?
Well, Richard, I've been asked this question many times, and I say to myself, it's almost on the same line as the bubble principle. So if you can guarantee to yourself that you have not mingled with other human beings who may be infected, in other words, in good, strict isolation for 14 days, and you are symptom-free, then we know you haven't got an infection. And then you can quickly go over to your grandchild and give him a well-deserved, much delayed hug. Of course, you can do it that way.
And generally, what do you think about grandparents looking after their grandchildren?
Well, the risks is to the grandparents, because the children will get better from a infection. What we are not sure about is, are the children infectious to elderly people or to any people? So we need to be cautious. Are children infectious? We are not 100% sure. So be careful. That's the best advice I can. Maybe wearing of masks and not mingling with too many people is also an additional precaution.
Judith always gives two friends a lift to church, she says. Now, churches are going to be reopening soon. Can she do that when services start?
Well, again, Judith would have to remain careful during the car journey. And I have advised before that you make that car journey with ample air ventilation through that car. On this hot day and hot June, July period, that's quite easy to do. So a lot of transfer of air, short journey as possible, and you may wear a mask as well. So when you put all those precautions in place, I think it will be a reasonably safe thing to do.
OK, there you go, Judith. You're back to church with people in the back, but be careful. And now Barbara is in a knit and natter group, aren't we all? Between 6 and 8 people gather in a large room. Can they start meeting up again? Barbara would like to know.
Yes, Barbara, and why not? Provided you all take precautions, and we know about all the precautions, which is, don't forget your hand washing, and you wash thoroughly and timetable it at least every 2 hours. Wash it and alcohol gel in between. Also keep your distance. Don't get too close to each other, so that if one is infectious and infected, it may infect you as well. And one more thing, wear a face mask because you're in a confined place. And of course, a lot of ventilation in those indoor places. And putting all those things together should enable you to at least get together with your small groups.
I don't know if you're a line dancer, Doctor, but we have a question here saying, can line dancing start?
The difficulty with line dancing, David, is that proximity. And I don't think you can retain proximity of more than 2 meters. I know the government is saying 1 meter plus. I always say if you're going to be less than 2 meters, you ought to be wearing a mask each. Therefore, we might get line dancers with their masks on.
OK, yeehaw. Hey, you did terribly well. That's a lot of questions you got through. Thank you so much. Your garden's looking fantastic as usual, and I love that tie.
Thank you, David.
Thanks for coming on. See you next week, I hope.